morning, everyone, and welcome back to our Parsha webcast. As I said Thursday that I would discuss this morning's the topic of this morning would be the Akeida, this famous incident where Hashem asks Avram to offer his son Yitzchak as an offering. And there's a lot of, this is a difficult, when you read the story and you just see it at face value, on the surface it has many, many questions that come to mind, and these need to be answered. And to understand in general what was the reason, why did Hashem do this? And the question is twofold. In other words, why would Hashem need to test Avram at all? And this question is not only regarding this last test, but regarding all the 10 tests that Hashem put him through. You want to see if he's loyal. Hashem doesn't need to see it; He knows it. And what's the point? And especially here, when Hashem tells him to slaughter his son, which seems to be a very radical and certainly irrational and harsh and maybe even cruel type of deed. And Avram, before he knows that the angel is going to come to him and tell him not to do it, he thinks he's doing it. Mm-hmm. And the question that comes to mind is, why would Avram be willing to do such a thing? And the question that is brought up many times, and we heard it also the other day, was this same Avram, he knew when Hashem wanted to destroy the people of Sodom, which is also in this week's portion, where Hashem says to Avram, I'm going to destroy those cities of Sodom and Amorah, Sodom and Gomorrah, and he tells him that I'm destroying them because they're terrible people and so on. And over there he stands up against God and he says, how could you do such a thing? It's unjust, and there's good people there, and he argues on their behalf. He tries his hardest to spare them from that fate. And here Hashem tells him on the morning, he tells him, please take your son and slaughter him. And here Shashtil, he says not a word. He doesn't try to defend his son and say anything on behalf of his son. Maybe he could have argued with God and saved him. So why that inconsistency on Avram's part? To the point that many scholars, modern scholars, have suggested that maybe Avram didn't pass this test. In fact, that maybe it was a failure on his part. So I think this story needs to be understood in its right frame. You have to frame it properly, and to realize that not only did he pass the test, did he not fail anything over here, but this is one of the greatest tests that a human being, ever passed. And in fact, the Jewish people have been using this for the last 3,500 years, or 4,000 years, to ask him to elicit from God mercy. On Rosh Hashanah we blow the shofar to remind us of the Akeida, because after he realized that God didn't want to kill him, he found a sheep, a ram instead. And the ram had horns and so on. So that reminds us of the Akeida. Why are we trying to remind ourselves of the Akeida on Rosh Hashanah? Because the Rosh Hashanah is the Day of Judgment. And the Day of Judgment means that God is judging the Jewish people and the world at large to see whether they deserve another year or not. Mm-hmm. And maybe we feel that some of us maybe feel that we're not so deserving. So on our own merits, we may come up short. So what we do is we bring out all the cards, right? We take out all our patriarch's merits to say, God, if you don't do it on my behalf, you don't want to say, give me a good year on my behalf. Remember who my father was, who my grandfather was, Avram. Remember what he did for you. So that alone should, and we use that all the time. We say it in our prayers every day. The beginning of our prayers every day is this story of the Akeida. And we do that for the same reason, before we daven, because in davening we're asking Hashem for our needs, and we ask Hashem if we want to be deserving. We don't want a gift. We want to be deserving. So we throw at God everything we can to make him have a good feeling towards us. So this is being used for thousands of years as one of the greatest merits of the Jewish people. The whole Zechrenis. In the Musaf of Rosh Hashanah, there's the three extra blessings, the Malchus, the king, the verses of kingdom, the verses of Zechrenis, remembrance, and the verses of Shefer, right? Those three extra parts. The whole middle section of Zechrenis, we ask Hashem to remember. What do we ask him to remember? We're constantly throwing, bringing up the memory of the Akeida. So the Akeida is that, it's the 10th test, according to some opinions. Some opinions are that there's another test after that. What was the test after that? Was the death of Sarah. A person would expect that after he did such an unbelievable deed to Hashem, he would at least treat him nice afterwards. No, the very next thing is his wife dies on him. And he didn't lose faith. So that was that's the 10th test, according to some opinion. But be that as it may, the test of the Akeida is the biggest test. The one that we recognize that was the biggest. I mean, even though one of the earlier tests was that Avram himself threw himself into a furnace to proclaim the unity of God, the oneness of God. This one is considered even greater than that. Huh?
I thought he got thrown in. He threw himself in?
I mean, he allowed himself. In other words, he could have saved himself. He was thrown in if he would have... In other words, they gave him a choice. They said, either you stop promoting monotheism, or you get killed. And he said, no, I'm not stopping to promote monotheism. You want to kill me, kill me. And they threw him into the furnace, and he was saved. It was a miracle. But he was ready to give his own life up. Nevertheless, we say the Akeida is even greater than that. So what is the story of the Akeida? Let's understand it. Now, the other question is, and this is probably the one that is most disturbing, is the whole idea of giving up your life for God has taken on a new dimension in the last 20, 30 years, especially in our time. And it makes a lot of people uncomfortable. God said to do it. The Muslims also say today that God told them to do this, to blow themselves up and kill a bunch of people with them. So, we parade this thing as a great deed of Avram, even though it didn't end up in a death. But we parade the fact that he was ready. So what distinguishes him and the Jewish people and the Jewish idea from what they're promoting and actually doing day in and day out. Okay. So let's try to understand it. The first thing you need to understand, so I'm going to try to do two things today. Number one, contrast what happened with Sodom and over here. That, I believe, is an easy distinction. That question is easily answered. Why? Hashem comes to Avram and tells him, I'm going to kill 5,000 people in Sodom, whatever the amount of people that live there, because they're terrible people. In other words, I'm going to punish them. What does the kind Avram do? Avram was kind. He represented, it was the manifestation of God's kindness here on earth. What does a kind person tell Hashem when Hashem tells you, I'm going to punish these people? He said, why are you going to punish them? Well, they're terrible. They're terrible. They're not so terrible. Yeah, terrible. They kill people. They do. Everyone. Not everyone. There's got to be some good people over there. See, God is telling him there's a reason I'm going to kill them. Because they are bad. In other words, I don't want them dead. I'd rather them live, but they can't. They don't deserve to live anymore. They lost their right to live. They're terrible, terrible people. Terrible people have to be killed. So Avram is trying to say to Hashem, they're not so terrible. And even if some of them are so terrible, there's got to be some good people there too. 50, 40, 30, that whole story. In the case of Sodom, Avram is trying. Hashem doesn't want them dead. The only reason he wants them dead is because they're not deserving to live anymore. So Avram is saying they do deserve to live. That makes sense. The case of the Akeida with his son, Hashem doesn't tell Avram, kill your son because he's a terrible boy. This is not a punishment. A lot of people see the Akeida as a punishment, as something terrible. Hashem comes to Avram and says, kill your son because he's special, not because he's terrible. Because he's unique, I want him as an offering for me. So what's he going to say to God? He's not terrible. I never said he's terrible. I said he's special. I have a desire to have him as an offering, to be brought up to me as an offering. What's Avram supposed to do over there? He accepts. If that's what you want, then that's what I do. It's not. This is not because. He didn't say, I'm telling you to kill your son because he's a terrible child. He said, then you have to defend. He's not so terrible. I'm telling you, I want him because he's special, because I want him as an offering. You want him as an offering, who am I to say no? That's number one. The second thing I want to now allow you to appreciate, after all, if God would come to you and say, slaughter your son for me, you have Rachmanis on your son. It's a terrible pity. He's going to die. So what was Avram thinking? And by the way, Yitzchak was also a human being over there. He wasn't a little 5-year-old. He was 37 years old at the time. Mm-hmm. He wasn't a little kid. So I'm going to preface this explanation by asking you a question. If a person an alien came to you today, landed from outer space, and he arrived at your doorstep, and he said to you, I would like to be holy. I'd like to become closer to God. Or someone, a secularist who has no education, he knows nothing about God, never heard the word God, came straight from communist Russia. And he says to you, he comes into America, he arrives at your doorstep and says, I'd like to become closer to God. I'd like to be holy. What would you tell him to do? That's a question. It's not a rhetorical question.
Pray to God.
Pray to God? Okay.
Let's pray.
Prayer makes you holy. Okay.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Cleans you up.
Anyone else?
Study.
Learn about God. He doesn't know he doesn't have a teacher. If he doesn't have a teacher, he knows nothing. He doesn't know how to study about God. What do you tell him then? What should you do?
Bring him to shul. He goes to a shul.
There's no shul. You live in the desert.
Who get a Torah, sit down with him, and start teaching him about Hashem.
Very good.
Day and night.
So you're saying we should teach him about God. And then what? And he'll know about God, he'll become holy. Knowing about God makes you holy.
It's up to him to become holy now.
Huh?
It's up to him now. I'll teach him about it.
But he wants to know, okay, so I learned about God. Tell me what to do now to become holy.
It's not about knowing, it's about doing.
Oh, so what do you have to do?
Exactly.
What would you tell him? What would you show him?
Do everything. Shabbat, everything a Jew is supposed to be doing.
Right.
Have him do it.
Like what? Tefillin, tzitzit,
Circumcision.
Circumcision. Okay. Now I'd like you to, I'm going to take you on a journey now, 4,000 years back in time. Let's go back now to Avram Avinu.
Okay.
Or not Avram Avinu, I'll take you back 4,500 years, to let's say the time of Noach
Okay.
and Mesushalach. Methuselah, you know Methuselah,
Yes.
the man that lived the longest. And all his colleagues, all the people that lived at that time.
969.
We're talking about an era when people lived for close to 1,000 years.
Right.
And they spent that time doing what? Agriculture, working the land, waking up every day, going to sleep. It was a long life. Very uneventful. There were no movie theaters to go for entertainment. There was really nothing going on as terms of excitement in life. At the same time, God never ever spoke to anyone at that time. He never communicated to anything to anyone. He spoke to Adam once or twice over there in the Garden of Eden on the first day of his life. He spoke to Noach, told him to build an ark. And the Torah doesn't record that he spoke to anyone else. We don't have any record of him having communicated anything to anyone besides of Adam on the day that he was born. It was the day that he was created in the Garden of Eden. And he criticized him for eating from the tree. He told him not to eat, and he did. And then Noach, 1,600 years later, he tells him to build an ark. Actually, he told them to build the ark 500 years before the flood. It took him how many years? 100 years. 100 years. It took him 100 years to build the ark. Did it all by himself. So this is a time where people are living exceptionally long lives with absolutely no direction what life is about. No one knows what life is about. God did not give a Torah to the people. He told them not to kill. Yeah, he told Noah after the flood.
7 things.
The 7 laws. So not to kill. And a few things. But more than that, there was on a daily basis, no one really had anything of significance to do. If a person asked Noah, I'd like to be holy, he had no answer for him. He had no answer for him. He had no answer for him. How do you be? I don't know. You're right. I never thought of that. How do you become holy in 3,000 years, 3,000 BCE? What do? You put on tefillin? There was no tefillin. You put a mezuzah on your door. There was no mezuzah. You give charity, maybe. That doesn't either make you so holy. You give someone money, big deal. That makes you holy. How holy do you become from that? So most people were not bothered by these questions, to be honest. This is not a question that was common. People didn't know about God. They never heard about him. He wasn't emphasized at all. No one served God. So they lived life. Life was life. We finished. They didn't know anything more. They didn't know anything better. They plowed their land. They grew some wheat and they baked it into bread. And they moved that life. What life went on. But there were a few individuals here and there that were a little bit more in tune to something higher, a higher purpose in life. A guy like Mr. Shalach, Noach. These were holier people. They were certainly interested in more than what their plow had to offer. You know what I'm saying? They thought they knew that God existed. They knew that God created the world. They had no idea why he created the world. He never told anyone why he created the world. He never shared his purpose. He first shared his purpose at Mount Sinai. He never really shared any purpose with anyone. So here they are searching in the dark. Someone that's searching for a little godliness, if they know God and they take an interest in God, they have no outlet. They don't know what to do with that interest. They're stuck. So they'd go to their mentor, and they say, Mentor, Mr. Shalach, I'd like to have a relationship with God. He created us. He's the all-powerful. How do I do this? I have no idea. Meditate. The best he would tell him is meditate. Meditate on what? What do we know about God to meditate? Very little, not very much. So what is such a person who really has a desire to become a little closer to God? What do you think his attitude towards life is going to be? What do you think such a person his attitude towards life is going to be?
To be a good person?
He is a good person already. I mean, what does a good person mean? Again,
a good person is to be kind to people,
okay.
To be kind to,
they do
to
that.
everybody, everything.
Yeah.
All his life is meaning to his head.
But if he's looking for spirituality, he's already being nice. He understands that you have to be nice to people. That's a menschliche thing to do. But if he's looking for a little spirituality, you and me, when we're looking for spirituality, you just told me you go to shul, you'll learn Torah. They didn't have any of that.
Right.
What do you do when you look for spirituality? And there is nothing there for you, there's no outlet. What did they do?
Some people had a special neshama.
So what did they do with that special neshama? The
They
neshama is
seek
burning in a desire to get close to God. They have no way to do it. They don't know what to do.
God would tell them how to do it.
But God didn't tell anyone anything. He didn't speak to mankind.
But
then.
Enoch, he told them.
What did he tell Noah? He told him to build an ark, that's all. He didn't tell him anything. What did he tell him? He told him to put on film. He told him lofty ideas. He didn't tell him anything.
I feel some people are more spiritual than others.
So
You now. But then, there were people more spiritual than others, and the pity was on those spiritualists. They had nothing, they didn't know what to do with that spiritual desire.
Rabbi, to get things properly in context, Methuselah, I believe, died before the flood.
Right, 7 days before the flood.
And Noah, it says about him, Noah
He's tzaddik.
B'dorotam.
Right.
In his
generation. Right.
So it's not that he was, on the same level
As
as
Avraham.
Abraham.
No.
But he was a tzaddik for his generation.
That's right.
Nobody
So,
in the
so
Bible.
that means it's the bar was much lower.
Right.
Because there wasn't an
That is
awareness
true.
of Hashem.
That is true. But let's understand what that bar was.
Yeah,
There was no bar. There
Right.
really wasn't, because they didn't have. So what? So a person like Methuselah,
What's his name?
who's a spiritualist, he was a man that had a soul, and he was in touch with his soul. He knew God. He knew that God was the creator of the world. He really wanted to get closer to him. And there was not only Methuselah, there was a lot of people probably. There were,
Right.
like more or less. Yeah. What do you think they were waiting? What was their greatest desire? You want to hear shocking?
Yes.
They couldn't wait to die.
Oh.
They couldn't wait to die. Because then their soul will go back to God, and over there they'll have a relationship with
So
Him.
they had that kind of an understanding that their soul would go back to God?
They knew where it came from. They knew it didn't come from earth. They knew it was a spiritual entity. They knew that here on earth there's nothing. This is a place where you have a plow, and you plant, and you have an ox. That's not spiritual. That they knew for sure. So what is spiritual? God. So here on earth, God doesn't exist. Not that He doesn't exist, but He's not revealed. He doesn't talk to anyone. No one knows anything about Him. He doesn't tell us anything. Let's go back to where we came from. Over there, we'll have Him. He's close. Over there is closeness to God. Isn't heaven? Heaven is closer to God than earth, at least in those days. And they were right. So they couldn't wait to die. So that if you were interested in eating meat and enjoying life, you didn't want to die. You wanted to stay on earth. This is where you have meat and enjoy life. But if you were a spiritual person, you had no interest in meat, and you had no interest in the physical, so you're interested in the spiritual, in God, and there's no God down here. So what do? You want to go back up. That's why there was such a thing called human sacrifice back then.
Right.
They offered themselves, so they didn't wait to die. They killed themselves. I don't want to be down here for 900 years.
Can't do that.
Let me get out of here. Let me go back up. The problem was, that was a sin. You're not allowed to take a life.
They
Still a
sacrificed
sin.
Themselves, their kids, people, they did everything, all that kind of thing. Because of this. But there was a mitzvah not to do this. You weren't allowed to kill. God told Noach, you're not allowed to take a human life.
But
So the people that were Noachites, a person like Methuselah, Noach himself, they were in trouble. They were stuck. They couldn't kill themselves. They couldn't let their soul go back up there, which is what they wanted. That they were stuck here on earth with absolutely no outlet of any spiritual, with no knowledge of what spiritual. How do you get close to God down here? This is the world that Avraham was born into.
what's the timeline between Noah and Abraham?
Avraham was born in the year 1948 from creation. Then Noach died. The flood happened in 1656, and he lived another 350 years after the flood. So how much is 1656? It's almost till 2000.
Yeah.
So
Maybe even to two. They lived a little bit together. They had a few years, 50 years together about.
but they didn't
Did
know
they
each
meet?
other.
I don't know if they ever met. I don't
No,
think so.
I
He
don't
lived in Nur Kazdim.
Abraham and
Noach
Noah?
lived. They crossed. They lived here on earth at the same time for Noach's last 50 years and Avram's first 50 years, something like that.
Okay. So there wasn't a big gap in time.
No, there was no gap at
There was
all.
overlap.
Yeah, they overlapped a little bit. Noach overlapped with. Noach was born right after Adam died, like 100 years after Adam died. So that's how. That's the life. That's the world that Avram was born into. Now Avram was already a whole different person. Avram found God like no one else did before. Meaning he understood much more, but he too was a little bit stuck in this situation where there is really no spiritual avenue with which he can. So what did he do? He was a prophet. So it says that he fulfilled the Torah. He did all the mitzvahs before they were even given. But between me and you and the lamppost, the mitzvahs were not really mitzvahs. There were no mitzvahs. God didn't give a mitzvah. He gave it at Mount Sinai. He just had a prophetic knowledge of what those mitzvahs would be, so he kind of like started doing them before. I mentioned it Friday night, that in his household they ate matzah on Pesach, even though Pesach didn't happen yet. But he had knowledge. So he ate matzahs, he baked a matzah. But between me and you, was there much spirituality in that eating of matzah? It wasn't commanded yet. So he's like relying on the future. These are the things that will be one day an avenue to get closer to God. So, and then on top of that, he also had a little bit knowledge of heavenly spiritual realities. So he did his best, knowing with full knowledge that it's lacking the essence, it's lacking the godliness of a mitzvah. It doesn't have, within that mitzvah that he did, God wasn't present. In the mitzvahs after Sinai, God is present. But the mitzvahs before Sinai, God wasn't present. It was kind of like on account of the future. And there was also a little spiritual connection to heavenly. He understood what these mitzvahs accomplish in the heavens. So he was able to accomplish those things too. But there really was a separation between heaven and earth. There was no merging and fusion of spirituality with the physical world at all. See, he too, with all his greatness, was a little bit lacking, or a lot lacking, in his ability to have a spiritual experience. But he knew that killing himself as a sacrifice to go back up to heaven was out of the question. This was not going to happen because God said not. Now, one morning, Avram gets a knock on his door. God's here. Avram Allah, I have a request from you. Take Yitzchak and bring him as an offering. What do you think went through his mind when he heard that? What do you think went through his mind when he heard that? This is great. This is great. Can I come along? Finally, God is asking me to go up. Finally, God is saying, you can go back up. It's not a sin. In fact, it's a mitzvah. So Yitzchak was certainly happy. Yitzchak was certainly thrilled. And that's why he went along like a tatali. He didn't put up any, no problem. He's going back up to God. There's nothing down here for me to do as a spiritualist. So God wants me up there. Why not? That's the best news he got in 100 years.
Wow.
That's the best news he got in 100 years. Or war, whatever. So Avram goes. He wakes up in the morning. Early, he's rushing. What are you rushing? To kill your son? But understanding it in this light, you understand what was his alacrity. Before God changes his mind, let me do this quick, right? So he runs. Comes to the mountain. Puts him up. He does the whole thing. He ties his feet. He ties his hands. He makes an offering. He puts the wood. He takes his knife, ready to slaughter. The angel comes and says, no, don't do it. Why not? And he begs him, let me at least cut a little bit, right? A little bit of an offering. That's what it says. The Medrash says that he begged him, let me do so. Till the angels, Al Tasle Muhammad, don't do anything. Don't even touch him. So Avram is now bewildered. What is this? Why not? What's the problem? So the angel tells him, Avram, here's the deal. Let me tell you why God told you to do this. Hashem wanted you to understand this wasn't just a test. This wasn't just a test to test his character, to see if he's devoted to God or not. There was a reason why God put him through this test. We asked before, why bother him with this test? You know he's going to fast it. What would he do? God was trying to drive home a very important point that the world never heard before. What was this new, beautiful idea that God was trying to convey through this test? He was telling Avram, you know what? You think that being holy is in heaven. You're so excited to offer up as an offering. And I know there's so many people around you that feel the same. I'm teaching you now a new idea. Holiness is to be found here on earth. In life, in godliness. In living life here on earth in a godly fashion. That's where holiness is to be found. The world never heard that before. The world understood that holiness is in heaven. That's where God is. That's where spirituality is. And that's why Avraham was excited to do this. Comes Hashem and says, no. When did this happen, by the way? In the beginning of this third millennium. This happened in the beginning of the third millennium. There's a famous statement, I think it's in the Zohar, that the 6,000 years of creation are divided into three sections. The first 2,000 years was chaotic, Toyu, Shnei Alofim Toyu, 2,000 years of chaos. Shnei Alofim Torah, the next 2,000 years were the 2,000 years of Torah, when the Torah was given, and the last 2,000 years is Mashiach, the Yemei HaMashiach. The Mashiach can come anytime. Avram lived in his earlier life, the first 2,000 years were marked by chaos. What is chaos? The world is unsettled. There's nothing here. No one knows what it's about. No one knows what it's about. That brings chaos into the picture. When God creates a world, doesn't tell anyone why he did it, doesn't tell mankind what you're here for, there's chaos. And that's how it was for the first 2,000 years. Avram with Avram begins the 2,000 years of Torah. What is Torah? Torah brings order to the world. There's a reason for everything. God has a purpose. This is the purpose. This is how you do it, etc., etc. That, the Akeida, and everything about Avram was the beginning of this new era. Life on earth is where you find God, not in heaven. The Medrash, the Talmud says, the sages tell us, that 1 minute of Torah and Ma'asim Tovim down here, 1 minute of Torah and good deeds in this physical world is better than the whole world to come. 1 mitzvah here. Why? Because God created the world with a purpose. What was the purpose? To make for himself a dwelling place here on earth. How do you make God a dwelling place here on earth? By doing a mitzvah, by being a mensch, by giving tzedakah, by inviting a guest to your house, by all the things we do. The first time God conveyed such a message to mankind was in the story of the Akeida. Avram is dying to send his son back up to become spiritual, and God's telling him, no, you keep him down here. This is where spirituality is to be experienced. Now, to be sure, till the Torah was given, it was much more limited. The full-fledged spiritual experience down here was after the Torah was given. But Avram was already given the mitzvah of circumcision, and this is when it's beginning. The first message that Avram had to hear was that God is to be found here on earth, not in heaven. That's the first message. And that's the message of the Akeida. There's no other message here. Avram was a loyalist. We know that. He knew that God knew that before. He knew that he was going to be ready to offer his son. He didn't need this experience. He didn't need to go through this whole, this whole show. He had to go through this whole show for a different reason. To teach him this most important lesson. By the way, I'm going to get to it in a minute to show you how this is the most important message of the whole Torah. So Avram, now we understand why he's arguing with the angel. Let me at least do something. And the angel tells him not even a drop of blood. Because God you'll find here, not in heaven. And the heaven is already, is a retirement plan. You die, you go there, you get your whatever, you get rewarded. It's nice, but that's not where God is. I mean, there's a level of godliness there, but the essence of God is here. And that's what the whole Torah is all about. That was the great invention or novelty of Mount Sinai. God actually came down to earth. He allowed himself to be experienced here on earth through mitzvahs. So if an alien came to you today and he asked you, how do you be holy? Sure, you learn Torah, you do tefillin, you do Chabad, you do this. We have the answer. An alien came to Avram, or any citizen of the world came to Avram, how do you be holy? There was only one answer. Go back up.
Sacrifice.
Go back up. There's no holiness down here. God in this Akeida is telling Avram a whole new idea, a radical idea, something that they couldn't really register. It took them 300 years to register that idea, till actually God gave the Torah. The Torah was given 400 years later. Took 400 years for this idea to come down to earth, to be properly, to register with the Jewish people, with the Abrahamic tribe. Not that they ever questioned it, but it's It's a process. That's what the Akeida is. Now, I want to just say that what differentiates the Akeida from modern-day terrorism, it's the heaven and earth. It's the difference between heaven and earth. Because once God said to Avram, in the experience of the Akedah, that I'm to be found here on earth, that life is here to be lived fully, and this is where you'll find me. A human sacrifice became the most disgusting, despicable deed ever. It was disgusting and despicable before also, because God had said not to do it, but no one understood it. To give your life, to end your life down here because you feel that up there is better, is the greatest corruption of godliness that there can be. Because the opposite is the truth. God is down here, not up there. Not that he's not up there. God is in Gan Eden but not just like he's down here. In a mitzvah, you have the essence of Hashem. That's where he wants us. And that's where he wants to be present. And therefore, understand this. Anyone that says, and I mean this, and this is not just the radical Islam, this is true for a lot of others. Anyone that says that heaven is better than earth is a dangerous individual, is a very dangerous person, is a potential terrorist. Anyone that really believes that heaven is better than earth is a very dangerous idea. Because from there to taking your own life and maybe taking some others because you want to do them a favor also and bring them to the better world is that there's a very short distance. In our own time, the ones that promote such an idea are the radicals. But think of the last 2,000 years. There have been many religions that promoted such an idea. You think Christianity did not promote such an idea? I wonder they don't believe that today as well. I don't know what Christians believe, heaven versus earth. But the Jewish idea is starting from the Akeida. That's the great message of the Akeida. That earth is better than heaven. That's what God was telling Avraham.
Rabbi, that includes euthanasia, right? Merciful killing, because there's a lot of not religious people, but scientists that they promote killing, merciful killing.
Look, that's I agree.
Do
You
we
shouldn't
have the
kill
right
anyone.
to do
You have no
that?
right to kill anyone. But that's not coming from a bad. It's not because they're not doing that because they believe heaven is better than the earth. They're doing that because they feel the person's suffering. Let's end this suffering.
But do
It's
we
a
have
different
that right
motive.
under
No, we
Torah?
don't. But it's a different motive. I'm trying to say it's a different motive.
Because I
Can't
know
compare
people that
them.
are not religious, but they advocate that.
Because it's from coming from a different place, not coming from a religious idea that heaven is better than earth. It's coming from it's human suffering. They don't want. They feel that why should a person suffer?
But what
Let's
is the
end the
bottom-
suffering.
but what is
It's
the
wrong.
bottom line?
It's wrong.
It's
You're not allowed to do
okay.
it. But it's not the same as killing a person because heaven is better than earth. That belief is a dangerous belief. That belief is the source of many, many problems in this world. Yiddishkeit promoted a whole new idea to the world. And it started in this story of the Akeida. Earth is better than heaven. This is where you find God. Avraham, I know you don't understand it right now, and you're begging to let me take him, and you're begging to get out of this earth, and there's nothing here on earth for you, and you can't understand why you should be here for so long. But trust me on this is where you find me. And let me tell you how to do it. Circumcision, charity, taking God, these are the things Avraham did. Those are the things Avraham did.
Hospitality.
And he found God. And he found
Yes,
God.
a big one.
And that's where he found God. That's where he was in touch with God. You're not in touch with God because when you're spiritual, you're in touch with God when you're physically spiritual.
That's true.
Because the real spirituality is here on earth. That's a nice spirituality. It's a nice, it's cute. But it's nothing more than that. You want the real deal, a mitzvah. That's the real deal. That's the real godliness in the mitzvah. And that's why the sages say one mitzvah down there puts the whole, is greater than the whole world to come. So, therefore, when we contrast Avram, the Akeida, and Al-Qaeda, it's two different worlds. It's opposites. The Akeida is telling us that, on the contrary, the Akeida is coming before the Torah was given. Avram is thinking that heaven is better than earth, and Hashem telling him, no, earth is better than heaven. Now, Avram was shocked. He was like, wow, you really, for real? How's that? Tell me how, what, when, where. So he told him. So that's when the 2,000 years of Torah began. And finally, the Torah was given at Sinai, where God told us, these are the 613 things you'll do or won't do, and that's where you'll be in touch with my essence. Not with a revelation of some sort, but my essence. That's where I am. So those that still believe that heaven is better than earth are corrupting the whole message of Torah. Corrupting the whole message that God gave to mankind. They didn't get it. They just missed the whole boat. They missed the whole message. And they're creating chaos in this world. They're bringing back the 2,000 years of chaos. Avram, the Akeida, took us away from the 2,000 years of chaos. And holding on to that mistake is bringing back the 2,000 years of chaos. And this is the message we have to teach the world. Our Christians, the Muslims, the whoever, Buddha, no matter who it is. And some Jews, who also don't really understand what the real message of Torah is. The real message of Torah is that the earth is better than heaven. This is not only better, it's infinitely better. That's why we're devastated when a person dies. Before Torah, people would love, when a person died, they missed their loved one. But someone that was a little more spiritual was like, okay, this is great for him. It says the neshama doesn't want to come down to earth. It takes a long time to get the neshama to agree to come down and to go into our body. It's very uninterested. Because in heaven it's right, one with Hashem. Why separate? Then it comes down, it's pushed into here. The Mishnah says, against your will you were born. You live against your will. God didn't ask you should be born, and no one asked you. You were born. So the neshama has to come down because that's the process, and it gets used to life on earth. Once it's here, it has a bar mitzvah, it starts doing mitzvahs, it starts doing things for God, it gets comfortable with the idea. Then to leave this world is very painful for the neshama. The neshama doesn't want to leave because it learned that the real experience of God is down here. So it doesn't want to go back up anymore. So death becomes a traumatic experience for the neshama. And that's why it takes so long for the neshama to leave the earth. 7 days, 30 days, 12 months, Kaddish, the whole process, till it finally goes back up. And it forgets what life was down here. It took as long as it took to get in here. It takes 9 months to come down here, maybe even more. And that's the reason, because when it was in spiritual, it had no concept of earth. It thought heaven was the place. So it didn't want to come down. Once it came down to earth and began to learn a thing or two about God, to really learn about God, the essence of God, that he never had up there. The real God he never had down up there. That's where he has it now. So now I don't want to leave. Now every film is to him an unbelievable experience. Get another one, live one. That's why we keep life going as long as we can. Choose life, the Torah says. Choose life doesn't only mean do a mitzvah. It means to literally live down here. That's why we prolong life as much as possible. Now, that's, as far as the end of life decisions, that's a whole different, this halacha is, you have to learn them and understand when it becomes, how much you have to do to prolong life. Whatever, that's already a whole different discussion. But understand the neshama is dying to stay down here. And that's the great message of the Akeida. That's what the Akeida is all about. It's this new lesson to mankind that changed 2,000 years of awareness. And it was a tremendous wake-up call to Avram. And to anyone that in his time that was a spiritualist. And it was after that, what happens the next thing after Avram, after the Akeida and Sarah dies? She died right away. Because of the Akeida, she died. There are interesting two opinions on that. One opinion says that she died when she heard that it was offering him. Another opinion says that she died when she heard that he was saved, from the joy that he was saved. It was so much for her that it's like when you think when a person thinks his child is lost and dead, and mitamol he walks in the door. The unbelievable, the neshama in the body can't contain that. It's too much for the body to get. By her it was too much. And she died as a result. So there's two opinions. One says from the death, and one says from the fact that he didn't die. Either way, she died right then. What's the next thing Avram does? He finds a shidduch for his son Yitzchak. That's what he does.
Why?
He tries to find a wife for his son. God's telling me life is on earth. All right, now we got to start living here on earth. Let's make sure there's another generation of Jews.
Right.
Let's go create life here on earth. He got the message. This is the message. This is what we're supposed to do. Prolong life, live here on earth, and not let's go have children. Let's go build it. Let's go build life. Let's go build the Jewish people that can bring this message to the world. You wonder why didn't Yisroel get married before? He's 37 years old already. What are you waiting for? He wasn't in a rush. What's marriage? Why should I get married? What, to bring another life, another soul down here to waste time? That was the approach. That's how they understood it. The more God says such a thing, we go get married. So that's what Avram suddenly tells Yitzchak, it's time to get married. It's time to build life here on earth. That's what he wants. He doesn't want us to go up there. He wants us to live here. And following this story is all about
So the whole
bringing
structure changes.
the whole structure changes. And this is what we are teaching the world for 2,000 years already, for 3,000 years, or whatever, since the Torah was given, since this moment. Life is on earth. God is on earth. And if you tell me that heaven is better than earth, you're a dangerous individual. It's very dangerous. It's a very dangerous attitude to have. Now, I don't want to make you I want to be clear on one thing. When I say when you say heaven is not better than earth, the pleasure in heaven is much better than the pleasure that we have on earth. The same sages who say one mitzvah down here is better than the whole world to come, the same sages say that one moment of bliss, of joy in the Garden of Eden, in paradise, puts away 100 years of greatest pleasure here on earth. So when you're measuring pleasure, heaven is a greater pleasure. Much greater, infinitely greater. But when you're measuring God, where are you in touch with God? The whole world to come's experience doesn't come to 1 minute of mitzvahs down here. And it's not a contradiction. It's not a contradiction. We're not measuring pleasure. We're measuring where do you find God. If you want pleasure, go to heaven. If you want God, stay on earth. That's the difference. Jews were looking for God, not for pleasure. Others look for pleasure, not for God. And that's a very dangerous thing to do. When God wants you to go there, you'll go there and you'll enjoy it. No question about it. But only God can take you there. Don't take yourself there. And certainly don't take anyone else there. Yeah.
So where was Ishmael all this time?
Oh, which time?
Excellent
The
question.
time that they were together. That was
Yes,
Ishmael.
Ishmael went to that
What
Akeida.
didn't have any influence on Ishmael?
Who said he didn't? He did have influence on Ishmael. It says Ishmael did tshuva at the end of his life.
And that's what came out of them.
It came out of him. It's not him. It was his children.
It was projected by God before.
And so, to expand this, and then what happened with Hagar? She came back. Hagar came
yes.
back. And while Sarah was alive, she was there with Abraham,
came
living
back,
with
yeah.
both of them
Yeah.
and having children.
Absolutely.
And Sarah was okay with that.
Yeah,
It doesn't
because she
say.
did tshuva.
It doesn't
Because
say.
Hagar did tshuva.
Yes.
She repented and she recognized that Yitzchak is the one that's going to take is the one that will be the heir to Avram, not Yishmael. Once they recognize that, they will welcome back into the house. And they come back.
That was the dispute between...
The dispute was who's going to be the heir of Avram.
Oh.
Yeah. Who is the Jewish people? Is it through Yishmael or through Yitzchak? And Yishmael was saying, I'm more important. I'm the older one.
The firstborn.
And I'm the firstborn, and I'm older, and I'm this, and I'm special. I was circumcised at 13 years old. You were circumcised at 8 days. It makes Yosh. What are you? Who asked you? You didn't even have a choice. I had a choice, and I chose to do it. Which he's not so wrong about, by the way.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's a separate issue. We'll talk about that
It
different
is.
time. But the point is
But he
that
came by
once
merit.
Hagar
He's-
and Yishmael recognized that and put Yitzchak ahead of him and recognized that the covenant of Abraham is going to be with Yitzchak, not with Yishmael, then they were welcomed back into the house. And they did tshuva. And they became an asset to Avram's home.
And both
And
bury Abraham.
Avram goes on to have another 6 children with Hagar.
Right.
Keturah is Hagar.
And that's
Keturah.
interesting that they weren't tzaddikim, these 6 kids that it said.
Whoever they were, they went on. I don't know who.
The chosen
Whatever
one
happened,
was
they
Isaac.
became fathers of nations, probably, of some kind of peoples. We don't know much of them after that. Yishmael, we know. Maybe too much, maybe. But you know what I mean by that. But the point is, they did tshuva. Yeah, it says Yishmael did tshuva, and he came and he put Yitzchak in front of him when they buried Avram at the end of this parsha. It says they came together to bury him. And who's mentioned first? Yitzchak. Yishmael put him first. He recognized his mistake, and Hagar recognized her mistake, and that's what happened. It's an interesting thing because Hagar is kicked out of the house in this week's portion. And suddenly they're back in the house again.
Right.
They snuck back in. What happened? But they're here again. Years later, they reappear. It's because they did tshuva.
But did
They
God send her
repent.
back?
I think Avram went sent to bring her back. Once he realized that she was, I don't know how it exactly happened, but she arrived back in the house. That we know for sure, because by the Akeida, Yishmael was walking together with Avram and Yisroel. It says he had 2 lads. The 2 lads with him. Who are the 2 lads? Eliezer and Yishmael. So he's back in the house. So that's the story of the Akeida. I hope it sheds some light and some clarity on this parsha.
Very much so.
But Avram did not fail over here anything, because this wasn't a question of protecting the innocent or protecting the Sodom. Sodom's a different story. God was punishing. He was saying, don't punish. By Yisroel, it wasn't a punishment. He was saying, I want him to be special to me. I want him as an offering. How do you argue with that?
And he
So
was willing to do it, right?
If you're centered on your own interests, then you'll argue with God. But Avram wasn't centered on his own interests. He was centered on Hashem's interests. So he obeyed. And the message is also that God will never tell a person to bring a human sacrifice again.
Right.
That never will happen again. Now, it doesn't mean that Jews didn't give up their life for God. They did.
Sure.
Many
Throughout
times.
history.
Throughout history. That's a different thing. It's not a human sacrifice. God's telling, don't worship Baal. You're forcing me to worship Baal. I'm not going to worship. You want to kill me? Kill me. But not that they're giving up their life. The Jews got killed because of their Judaism throughout history, and hundreds and not thousands, and who knows how many people. They wouldn't convert. They wouldn't do, all
Just
kinds of
reading
stories
about
of
the
heroism.
yeah.
Rabbi Akeida, the 10 martyrs that we read about in Yom Kippur. It's not human sacrifice. God forbid. They would not. That's so treif by a Yid. It's so despicable by a Jew, the idea of human sacrifice. But sometimes God is more important than my own life. That's the point. Human sacrifices mean that I'm important. And that's why I want to become a sacrifice.
Right.
Rabbi Akiva wasn't thinking about himself. Rabbi Akiva put God before him. You want to take me? Take me. I'm not giving up on my relationship with God. It's a different thing. It's the opposite. It's not thinking about himself. It's thinking about God. Mesiras Nefesh by Yid is where he doesn't think about himself at all. Human sacrifice is all about yourself. What are these Muslims doing? They're not thinking about themselves when they do this. They're thinking all about themselves. It's all about them. They'll have a better life up there. A Yid thinks about a better life up there when he's giving up his life.
Kiddush Hashem.
Kiddush Hashem is a different thing. It's about Hashem. It's not about me. It's the opposite of me. It's two worlds. It's the opposite between heaven and earth, between good and evil.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay.
Excellent point.
Right.